Hi, welcome everyone. This episode is all about the interplay of music and time. This video is part of a longer YouTube series where we take academic music knowledge and apply it to music production and Eurorack patches. Let's have a look at a few previews. So as you all know, music is part of the family of time-based media, which means time is needed to experience the full extent of a music composition. What is interesting though is that music and time can interact in at least three different ways. Physical time describes the time it takes for music composition to finish and for different sound objects or notes, etc. to finish as well. Psychological time focuses on our experience of time while we listen to a music piece, because we could experience a much longer or shorter time period when listening to any piece of music. Lastly, there is the time that is displayed in music itself, and I want to talk a little bit further about all these three interactions in this video. There's actually a whole nuanced debate about how time and space interact, and there is voices in the music community that time itself is actually at the subservice of space and presenting space. For example, reverb is a function in time, but actually displays space. But this is a can of worms I don't really want to open in this video. So let's keep it with the three aspects of time that I just described, starting with number one, physical time. I found that Curtis Rhodes in his book Microsound has created quite helpful divisions of physical time that are helpful for composers and make them more approachable. The timings are infinite time, supra time scale, which is a time beyond our typical composition. The macro time scale is the time scale for full composition, often minutes, sometimes hours, occasionally days. The meso time scale is the division of forms, so the time it takes for groups or sound objects to finish. The sound object time scale is the time for one note or sound to finish. The micro time scale is the time scale for sound particles that take up a note or maybe a few milliseconds to finish. The sample time scale is the time it takes for one sample to pass. The subsample time scale are sounds that are too fast to be recorded, and the infinitesimal time scale are infinitely short aspects of time. So how can this division be useful for us composers? Well, I find it really interesting, for example, that when you're stuck in a composition, you can switch between the micro timescale and the meso timescale or the sound object timescale and see how changes in one timescale will have an effect on the higher or lower timescales. I also find it interesting to have certain features in a smaller timescale that might be reiterated in higher timescales. For example, certain types of repetition could be happening on a sample basis, on a sound object basis, but also as bigger structures come up, which opens up quite a few interesting ways of structuring music on the micro or macro time scale. Looking at the psychological time is the time we experience when listening to a music piece. And here I found a recent paper by Jason Noble et al. Suggesting that when music exceeds or undercuts thresholds in 5 principles of auditory perception, which are segmentation, grouping, pulsing, meter, or repetition, they may be perceived as timeless. In detail, they say that sequences, meter or short sequences, become timeless when they are too long for our analytical perception, often when they are spaced wider than 5 seconds. They also become timeless when they are too complex or too short to be perceived accurately, as you can see in this graphic. The paper emphasizes that there are no hard and fast rules at this point, as our human perception is highly complex. But as a composer, it is worth remembering that if sound events become too short, too long, or too complex for our auditory perception, we may create music that is perceived to be timeless. So far we have talked about the physical time and the psychological time, but what we haven't talked about yet is the third interaction, which is the time that is actually displayed within the music. And here I found a really interesting paper by Simon Emerson. It's a really short paper, so I recommend you to check it out yourself as well. In short, the paper distinguishes 4 different types of time that can be displayed in music. There is now time cycles, the time of history, and unreal or idealized time. Now time is basically hearing every sound as it comes up, influenced by what we have heard an instant ago. Music that features a lot of now time is often very gestural, for example like this. Time cycles are layers of time, for example, days, weeks, months, years, presented in music, but also they're incomplete segments, such as music about dawn to dusk or birth to death. Time of history can be presented, for example, by showing past events or past eras. I, for example, made a music piece about the Industrial Revolution. Time of history can also include aesthetics that are reminiscent of a past time. For example, the sound of tape machines, the sound of vinyl, or the Moog sound. The last aspect is unreal and idealized time, which is music that shows time beyond time and is often focused on showing archetypes, symbols, and their transformation. Oftentimes, this infinite time is beyond human comprehension, making us instead, again, focus on the now, closing the circle. Okay, so now you have a bit of an overview of physical time, psychological time, and presented time. Let's check out a few Eurorack examples and see how we can convert those ideas into interesting music. So for this first patch example, I've put a section of a vinyl recording on my Morphagene. The recording itself is about 20 seconds long, and with that in the meso time scale. But I'm using the Morphagene's gene size selection to focus on the sound object and micro time scale here to create new sound gestures. I have all of this linked up to the Mimeophon delay, so if I really liked specific gestures I made, I can recall them later, further playing with events in time. Here are a few more examples that show that you can create completely new sound material by shaping and arranging sound material in the sound object and micro time scale. What I really like to do in my patches when thinking about time is to record short phrases into the Mimeophon. Because of the long delay time of the Mimeophon, these short phrases or musical ideas will come back maybe after 30 seconds, after a minute. And so what I do in my jamming sessions is that once I hear those sounds and gestures back, I kind of can start to jam with myself, responding to sound material that I've made a minute ago, which is kind of nice. Of course, when talking about time in repetitive music formats, it's also possible to change the BPM throughout the music piece or a music loop. I find this much easier to do in a DAW where you have a lot of fine-tuning capabilities, but it is also possible in Eurorack, of course. Here's a quick example of what I've arranged in a DAW to give you a sense of what a final composition like this could sound like. Have a look at the BPM meter to see how the BPM changes over time. Recreating something like this in Eurorack is actually quite straightforward. All you need to do is to feed a clock into a sequencer of your choice and have that clock slow down or speed up over time. In this example here, I'm using the end of cycle gate of a maths, and I am increasing or decreasing the envelope length, so the gate intervals will become shorter or longer over time, leading to different BPMs when this signal is used as a clock. Of course, you can always change the clock live to create wonky beat intervals. Lastly, we should talk about repetitions as a behavior in time. When I have repetitions in my music, I'm actually quite a big fan of having small nuances or differences between each repetition. And in Eurorack, a few modules are especially suited to create small nuances on every step, on every trigger. One of those is the voltage block from Maleko Industries, shown in this patch. I basically have 8 different presets of CV values that I can send to my Mimeophon to change how it sounds every time I trigger it. Alright, that's all I have for you today. Thanks again for watching. If you found this content helpful, leave a comment, subscribe, interact with the community, and I'll see you all in the next video.